Hey folks, the Lord works in mysterious ways. The Lord speaks to us in mysterious ways. It's odd when I think about some of the videos that I did in the last week and a half, and how they've all tied together in some ways. Regardless of the topic or the theme, they've all had these really interesting intersections. I did a video the other day on Moses and social justice. That Moses, commanded by God, went and spoke to power. Let my people go. One of the comments that was left by a friend of the channel, man, it had me really thinking. I mean, it's been on my brain now for a few days. It's really grabbed me. And I think it's offered me a really fascinating and somewhat terrifying lesson. The comment was along the lines of, well, what about the Egyptians? All the pain and all the suffering the Egyptians faced, all the torment, all the death, all the grief that those Egyptian mothers would have felt for the loss of their sons who were in the army, drowned in the Red Sea. What about them? Yeah, God wanted God's people free, but all those Egyptians suffered. And they were innocents. I had to give that a lot of thought. Because that story, when you think about it in that way, that doesn't offer us an image of the God that Jesus offers us. It's very difficult to see the relationship between the God that Jesus offers and the God that would punish innocent people. People who had nothing to do with what was happening in the story. But in truth, they were a part of the story. In truth, they weren't necessarily innocent. And please understand, what I mean by that isn't that every single Egyptian person took an active and intentional role in the suffering of the Israelites. Not every Egyptian took an active and intentional role to hurt the Israelites, to enslave the Israelites. Many probably didn't take any kind of active and intentional role in the captivity of the Israelites. But that's not really the point. See, we look at this story and we hear about Pharaoh, the big baddie, right? Pharaoh's the guy. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. It comes across as though the good guy is God, the bad guy is Pharaoh, and Moses is the voice of God to Pharaoh, the face of God to Pharaoh, the messenger of God to Pharaoh. But that's not really, Pharaoh isn't the one who is in opposition with God. That's not where the struggle lies. The struggle lies between God and Egyptian society at that time under Pharaoh. Moses was representing God. Pharaoh was representing the Egyptian society at that time. You know from reading your history that kings and queens, emperors, empresses, these rulers, in whatever name we want to offer them, these rulers don't really generally have the kind of power that maybe we like to think they did. Pharaohs were considered God kings, right? They were considered living gods, and yet they were assassinated, stabbed, poisoned, killed when their people became unhappy. Whether that was the regular common folk who a ruler has to make sure are happy or they will rise up in rebellion, or if that was the aristocrats, the people of means and of wealth, of power under the Pharaoh. Pharaoh had to make sure that they were happy, or else they would have him killed, and put a ruler in place that would make them happy. We see this all throughout history. Very, very, very few rulers ruled with absolute power. Most had to walk a very, very fine line to keep their power, to keep what it is that they'd amassed for themselves. So Pharaoh was a representative like Moses was a representative. Pharaoh was the representative of an Egyptian society that, despite the fact that not everybody was actively and intentionally involved in the enslavement of the Israelites, this society was net beneficiaries of the labor of the Israelites, of the captivity of the Israelites, of the suffering and the enslavement, of the torment of the Israelites. Egyptian society benefited from having Israelite slaves. Now we look back in my Canadian history. I'm a part of a society that benefited. We built ourselves up into what we are through theft and destruction. We built ourselves up through the suffering of others. We built ourselves to be the nation that we are by lying and by breaking our oaths and our contracts, breaking our promises. Many nations around the world have done that kind of thing. We see it all over the place. So for me, as I look back on what about the Egyptians, on that question, and I take a look at it, and I look at it from a certain perspective, then I can see that there's a lesson there for me. I've never actively and intentionally caused someone to be enslaved. I've never actively and intentionally sought out to make someone suffer for my gain. But I live in a society that has benefited from those things. So what does this tell us? What does this lesson indicate that we should do as members of societies that have benefited from the suffering of others? May the Lord bless you, may the Lord keep you, may the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. I pray that as we take a look at this perspective, we see where we should be. We see what side we should choose to be on. Amen.